times, and my call sign's W4PSA. I've been a club member for I think 7 months now, and met Charlie Trier here in Birmingham at our Ham Fest a couple of years ago through a group of friends, and he was nice enough to work on a CW and Morse Code presentation. We're going to show a little comedy video clip of Charlie in a minute. Yeah.
Oh, I've never seen this.
But you want to say anything before you?
Just a guess. Okay. Well, I'm a little hard of hearing these days. Anybody wants to ask a question, or if I get something wrong, want to interject or make a point, just talk a little loud. My name's Charles Trier, and I've been at Ham since 1977, and my interest in radio started with the Boy Scouts of America. And I said that the meanest two things that the Boy Scouts did to us, they made a whole bunch of 80-pound scrawny boys jump in a freezing cold lake to take our swimming test, and they made us learn Morse code. I don't know which one was meaner, but it was required for advancement from second class to first class scout, and we passed our test with this sending device down the scout hall. And in this isn't quite right, in 1982 I flunked my general class code and had to be told that I failed by a girl who is prettier than Farrah Fawcett. Boy, did that ever sting. The following year, March 15th, 1983, I became a general class ham at the FCC office in New Orleans. And I think the biggest problem back then with passing any ham test was, now we take it from volunteer examiners who are hams like us. And they wear jeans or whatever. But when you took it from the FCC, these people had suits and ties, and they looked like the FBI. And you were taking it from the feds, And when I took my test, the examiner stepped out in the hallway and said tonelessly, "Those of you who need a 13-word-a-minute test, step to this side of the hallway. Those needing 20 words a minute, step to this side." And so we were like, "Abandon hope, all ye enter here." But I passed. So, just a little bit, where's my pointer? A little bit about the history of the code. Samuel Morse sent the first message, "What hath God wrought, I have heard." In 1901, Marconi received the first transatlantic radio message from a place called South Wellfleet, Massachusetts, and it was sent from the extreme southwest corner of London in Cornwall, and the message went across the ocean, and it was at a lower frequency, somewhere around 200 meters, and all he heard was, they told him to listen at night, and they were going to send it the letter S, until finally he heard a tick, 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 and 2 years later, Marconi had built a big transmitting station at South Wellfleet, and they exchanged the first message. It was 1903, and the world became a smaller place. A little bit about the a little bit about the early Morse code transmitted by a rotary spark generator. You've seen the movie Titanic, and that's what those, the early part of the century, the wireless had a thing called a rotary spark generator that sent a dampened wave, and the sound of that thing was god-awful, and it was probably 50 kilohertz wide, harmonics all over the place. But that's what they used. Receivers were so crude, you had to have a giant antenna, and these things had about 5 kW, but you could still barely hear them. That's how inefficient it was. So, what happened? About 1910, a genius named Edwin Armstrong invented a receiver called a regenerative receiver. And what he did was he took the DeForest tube, which had a grid in it, and he, barely out of his teens, took a little bit of the feedback from that and fed it back into the grid of that tube, of the output. And he found out that these, instead of having to live very close to a radio station to be able to hear them, he could pick up stations many, many miles away. So the receiver was, the super regenerative receiver was a giant step forward. Also, the idea of the feedback coming back into the tube was the basis for the first oscillator, and it gave way for the first CW for the first transmitters that were really efficient, and these rotary spark generators were immediately junked. In fact, about 1920 they were outlawed. So that's generally. Now, what is the continuous wave as we know it? This is an AM signal. The AM signal has 2 sidebands, upper sideband, lower sideband, and this carrier wave right here. You press your key. We send only the carrier wave. This right here. So if you have an old AM receiver, you click it to the AM button, and you go to the CW bands, about all you hear is a pss, 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 pss. You might hear the code, but it just sounds like holes in the static. Just pss, 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 like that. Okay? Now, with a single sideband, what we've been able to do after World War II, I'll throw this in there, they found out that instead of the AM transmitting AM, they could filter out this carrier wave and the other sideband and made a very efficient, very narrow upper sideband and lower sideband. That's what it is. However, with this carrier wave, you're not going to be able to hear it on the IF of an AM receiver. What to do? What to do? Beep. This is called a beat frequency oscillator. It'll be on every modern, any modern super heterodyne receiver. Well, what this will do is, after this second detector, this is a narrow range oscillator centered on this zero, on the IF frequency. It goes about, I'd say about a kilohertz and a half above and below it. And what this does is this. Can you go back to the original one? What this does is this raises this zero tone about 600 to 800 hertz above and below, and that's where you get your tone from, and that's what it does. And if you want to kind of win a bet on a trivia question, just bet that when two CW stations are in a two-way QSO, they do not talk on the same frequency. What they do is the 0 beat is what they transmit on, and it wouldn't work unless they could hear above and below. So they have to listen on this. So two-way CW conversation, slightly different frequencies from transmit and receive. Okay. Gotta be careful. Okay. Here's two of my keys. They have a way of accumulating too. I should have got Russ to take a picture of all of them, but anyway, this is a very nice. These two are just called straight keys. In England, they call them pump key, and a pump is a little bit more descriptive because they kind of work like a pump. But after I guess hours and hours of bending your wrist like that, I guess I don't know if they knew what carpal tunnels was back then, but I imagine, well, I did it a lot when I was a novice, and the wrist hurt. But anyway, after a few years, they went to a new kind of key, flip it. And this is called a semi-automatic key. Some people call them a bug because it kind of looks like a mechanical beetle or something like that, or so they think. And the way this works, this is really cool. This is a weight, and this weight strikes a spring here, and this is the thumb lever. And when you slap that, this spring will bounce off this spring, and it will tick, 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 tick like that several times till it runs out. And it'll just keep going. But that's for the dots. But the dashes, you have to control. So it's easier on the wrist, but there's a learning curve to using one of these. And the old guys, the old CW operators, like my uncle in World War II, they're the ones to look up to because they could manage this. Because with this, you have to time the dot with the dashes on the spring. And you also have to control the space between them. And back in the old days, when there was like a round table or several people in a net, and they were all transmitting into the net, you could tell who was operating without listening to their call because they had a particular accent. Maybe the dashes were just a little bit longer, or the time between the dash and the dots were a little bit different. But you could, after a while, you could listen, and everyone had a kind of like a signature, and you could tell who it was. That's a real interesting feature of the bug. Nowadays, we got this, and this makes a pretty good operator out of maybe me. But this, all of this right here, this is a paddle right here, and the dots and the dashes are made the same side. The dot dash ratio is usually 1:3, but there's a control on here called weight control, and you can adjust that. You can speed up and down, volume up and down, and it's all of these people using these high-speed things like the CW ops and things like that are That's what they use, if not a computer. And the computer, of course, on the big contest stations, they have a single key, and they just send out the QSO, the acknowledgement. But you still have to be able to do the code because you have to type in the station's call sign. There's a fantastic little girl over there in Hungary. Her call's HA6AA, and she is so fast on one of those uncluttered, youthful lines, I guess. But she can just really fly. And I called her once or twice, and I asked her name, and she just sent LENA faster than lightning. I just couldn't get it. So I said QRSURNAMEPSE, and she said LENA to make fun of an old guy. There are people who are capable of incredible speeds with this. And my uncle, who I mentioned, WA6JZG, was a radio man in World War II, and he was a Marine. And I asked him what he did in World War II. He said, "Son, a Marine is MOS is a rifleman. That's the first thing you know." And he said, "My second MOS was a code operator and radio repairman." And my uncle had an interesting career in the Marines. He kept going, his rank kept going up and down because he would get 3 stripes and then get into a fight and then lose his stripe. And then he would get his stripe back, and then he was sassed a couple officers and back down to corporal again. So it was kind of like up and down. He ended up as a train dispatcher for the railroad, where he used a key, phenomenal, and he ended up as a superintendent, so I guess he did okay. But that's a little bit about keying. Go ahead and advance it. Since code it's an awkward language because everything has to be spelled out. You have to spell everything. So what you have to resort to, or what people do, is a lot of abbreviations, and we use these things called Q signals. People talk about QRM, interference, QRS, send slower, QRV, ready, and all of those things. But we Q signals, and there's a lot of abbreviations. Go to the next one and show that. Yeah, these are abbreviations. I've seen most of these. FB, that's when you're pleased with something. And that's pretty much, I haven't seen all these, but these are, during contests, TU will always end it, thank you. And during a contest, during a code contest, if you expect an honest signal report, go somewhere else, because 5NN, which stands for 599, that means I finally heard you. So you're not going to get an honest signal report. So we got the Q signals, and go ahead. Tips for learning. I told a couple of other fellows here this morning that the aids that there are for learning this nowadays are fantastic compared to what we had in the 60s and 70s. When I was trying to learn, all we had was cassette tapes and on-the-air practice. But there's a great computer program called G4FON, just G as in George, 4FON, and you just log on, and there's just endless practice and that you can vary the speed, you can vary the noise level. Unfortunately, the guy's name was Ray. Unfortunately, he's a silent T now, but his program still goes on. Repetition is the key to remembering anything. Frequent exposure for short periods, just like learning anything, college course or anything like that. Another thing that I really wish that I had known, I really, really wish that someone had taught me was this. The Farnsworth method. And what the Farnsworth method is, the individual letters are fast, but you have a gap between them, which you learn to recognize the letters fast. And if somebody had taught me that and worked with me with that, instead of taking 3 years to make general, I probably would have done it in 6 months. My biggest failure as a ham, when I was young, I thought I didn't need anybody, and I didn't. I didn't think I needed any help. So a deal like joining a radio club like this, or engaging some older people who had been there before me, who could teach me how to make it, I just didn't do it. That's why our club here is such a good thing. Short practice sessions, and this is another one too. Try to copy at speeds above your ability, even if you can't, because you'll find out if you're shooting for 10 words a minute, try 12. And that's, you can't quite get 12, try 13, and you'll hack away at that. Then when you fall back on 10, you will have mastered it. And that's what I did with it. When I passed the code in 1983, I could barely do 13. The test nervousness and the shock of the FCC people and all of that, it got me. But if you've got a gap, if you've got a buffer zone of about several words a minute, when you fall back on that. When I took it the next March in New Orleans, I've been practicing about 18 or 19 words a minute, then the test was easy. So that's how you advance. You'll always advance in speed if you'll try to do more, to go way faster than you think what your ability is. And ARRL W1AW will give you they'll give you a certificate, a nice looking certificate. What they do is they send these code practice sessions from Pages and QST. And if you get 60, what is it? You have to get, I guess you have to get 60 letters. Does anybody know that requirement to get the code certificate from the ARRL? Well, possibly that, maybe a minute of perfect copy. But what you do is you write it down and you mail it to them, and when this test session was, and if you get it right, they'll send you back a real nice certificate. And let's see, the G4FON Morse program, this right here, it's wonderful. Anything, I would have given anything for that. And K6RAU, Beginner's Morse Code course. I don't know about that, but it sounds good. DJ5, CW Learn, CW Online, they're both probably good. This would be a German ham, of course. And that's about all I have, other than just say anyone with needing any help or advice, or have any questions today, I'd be tickled pink to help.
Yes, not really a question, it's just a comment. One resource building I don't see here is the Long Island CW Club, which is another really good one.
I should have mentioned that, the Long Island CW Club, and do they have an online course?
Do they have what?
Do they have an online course?
Yeah, basically what you do with that club is they have like meeting times, and you can set up at your own pace, connect, and then they've got different levels of things that you can work on, and you get practice that way. It's a really good way to learn code. Those people are very patient and will work with you immensely, trying to get you. And that's why the club is so wildly popular, because they're doing such a good job of teaching it, being patient, and everyone can learn at their own pace. And one other thing to mention, when you learn code, what was a nightmare for me back when I used code was I learned the 5 words a minute so I can get my certificate. And I was one of the last hands to earn the CW endorsement before they got rid of it completely. That was my reason for becoming a ham, actually. I wanted to beat that thing before it went away. And, once I fell out of a tree over the, so the 5 words a minute, I wanted to get faster and faster. The problem is, after about 9 words a minute, you get so used to hearing da, and you think A, and then you hear like did, and then you say S. Your brain hears that one letter and converts it in your head. You can't do that for higher than about 9 or 10 words a minute.
That's right.
You have to relearn it all over again to hear it at speeds faster than that. Because you're not hearing the letters anymore and making a word in your head. You're hearing the entire word at once.
Yeah,
And that's the trick. That's where practice is so important.
What you'll find will happen when you get to that plateau you're talking about, to 10 to 12 words a minute, you'll find out that you'll start, when you try faster, you'll start recognizing words instead of letters. That will happen.
Yeah.
And I know exactly what you're talking about, the plateau. That's what slowed me down. That's what slowed me down. But practice faster and faster, and you recognize whole words. That's a good point. Is there any more? That's all we've got? Okay. Well, thanks for your attention. Appreciate it. Maybe the club officers would be interested, if they're interested in a short talk on low power operating, which I'm also interested in. For the future, I'll be glad to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a whole lot to Russ. If it hadn't been for Russ, I would have been.